Now that that part is complete, I'm going to go ahead and put on the automatic axle on the passenger side. Then we're going to be using the manual axle from a manual Accord along with that intermediate shaft that we showed you early on in the video. Underneath the car, you can see how the new manual axle works. Bolts right in like it's supposed to be there. This right here is the manual Accord intermediate shaft, and then you'll see the automatic axle over here. Moving on, we're going to the shifter. This right here is the original shift cable for the automatic transmission. We got to take down this heat shield that sits up here to expose it. That also means we're dropping the exhaust line. So it looks like there's going to be this is a 12, and then we have two 10s over there. We'll go ahead and undo these. Moving into the interior, I think it's pretty obvious here what's going to have to be removed. Now, if you've made it this far in your swap, then taking and figuring out how to remove the center console shouldn't be too difficult. To get the front half of that off, we have to get the back half of it off. And there is a screw right there in between the seat. I was able to get to both sides just like this, squeezing it in there. Getting it back in there might be a little bit more difficult than what you see here. Inside the armrest, there's another little cover there. There's two screws that hide behind it. And it looks like this one's just gonna pop right off of here. So that'll get to the back side, which exposes some screws underneath of it. We have the two screws back here off, and then up here I wasn't sure, there always is like some hidden screws in these Honda consoles, man, and so I was able to pull on that, and it looks like it just clips on here. Alright, then as I was pulling, it still feels a little bit tight, you know, around this bend here, and then so I pulled off the I pulled out the ashtray, and right there, if you're looking for the OBD2 port, it's right there also, but there's that screw as well. Looks like that'll do it. Just unplug all your sensors here. This looks like it's for the clock. The cigarette lighter should just twist off. Now we're going to be moving into the center console itself, and I'm pulling on it to see where it's tight at, and I could see right away there's going to be some screws right here, which we would have to remove this garnish just to get to. Now we still have to remove all of this to be able to get to all the bolts that are going to hold the shifter on. Man, they sure know how to hide those screws. So I had to also remove the glove box, which exposes that little screw right there. It felt like that was the last one before we get into the shifter. What a pain in the balls. That was a lot of work. And really it's because we're trying not to break anything, right? So if this was your car, you'd want to take your time and so that you could put everything back, make it look like you never did anything. So there's a lot of things here that you got to pay attention to, and more importantly, not break anything. So we just want to unplug everything. We're not going to be cutting anything because we are going to be needing a few of these plugs here for the neutral safety switch and reverse lights. We got to figure all that stuff out. There are 4 12mm bolts that hold this thing on. By disconnecting all the clips here first, you'll be able to access them right there, and there's one on the other side, and then boom, it's off. Now we still have the cable that's running down through the exhaust tunnel that's still attached to the shifter. We could actually remove it right here. Looks like this right here is some kind of clip. Let's see if we can. By the way that it looks like it'll just pull right up. Here, let's get in there. Lift straight up. Uh-oh. It pulled straight up like I was struggling with. I just missed it, and that clip shot off somewhere into the abyss. Who knows where it is right now. But now that it's off, now it looks like the rest of the cable is attached by these two 10s right here. Let's just zip those off, and I bet you this cable will come right out. That was it. Wiedersehen. My daughter just taught me that. She took a year of German in high school. Now that the shifter is removed, we don't want to discard it. We're going to need to figure out things like neutral safety switch and reverse. And we'll be able to do that just by like simply moving the shifter into position and seeing where it's making contact points. And I know that one of these are going to have to be looped, and I'm pretty sure it's these power wires here, which are going to be over here in the harness here. Once we get to that point, we'll get a little bit more detailed on what we're going to need to do there. So I went and grabbed the shifter. And my theory was that, you know, it would be cool to see if the bolt holes that held the automatic shifter down were the same for these. Sometimes the base is different, but check this out, guys. As I said in there, not only does it fit really well, like it's supposed to be there, but the holes align also. Look, you can see right down there, all of them, all four. Boom. And because we were smart, we made sure to grab all that hardware. The hardware that I was telling you that you should probably take just in case, we did. So here is a little case of hardware. I even took this plastic, I don't know, what do you call this dish. That's actually right there on the automatic also. So we don't need this. Turns out the auto has it, but look at these special bolts here. These are a lot different than the bolts that were on the automatic shifter, and it has the washers and everything else, and I also made sure to grab the clips. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt in the shifter, and then we'll get to the cables after that. There was a special clevis pin for this shifter cable over here. That was something that you'll definitely want to remember to grab when you're grabbing your shifter and cables out of your donor vehicle. We chose to use a new one because we can. We have them here, and I think maybe the other one we just cut off to get this off to begin with. These are the clips that are going to hold the cables to the shifter itself. And we're going to be facing the flange. You'll see there it's flanged. You're going to face it towards the shifter, and then you'll tap it in snug with the hammer there. And the same also on this side. So if you remember how you took it off, it goes back on the opposite order. Boom. We are getting real close. Underneath the vehicle, we can now bolt on the grommet, and man, this thing really makes it convenient. It looks like it's exactly the same, and that means this retainer here that holds it and seals it up is gonna match also. It's almost like it's meant to be there. Well, I'm being facetious. I'm pretty sure it is meant to be there. But man, it's really nice when you don't have to make anything and it's a bolt-on deal. I was really surprised about the shifter, and this is also to my surprise as well. So here is your shift cables, and the original route is going to be on the back side of the rear subframe. So right where you see my hands go is where the cable is going to go also. Cable routing can be a little tricky too. So if we see where the cables are coming from under the exhaust tunnel, they're going to come over the rear subframe, and they're going to come in between the intake manifold and that rear T-bracket right there. So I think naturally you'd want to set it on the other side, which I did originally, but it can't route that way. Routing it this way will make a straight shot to the transmission. In the bay, you can see how they're going to come straight out from the rear T-bracket. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here, so if you just bear with me and work with what you can see here, it's going to go underneath the wiring harness here. See, it'll sit right here, and then the other one goes right there, and then boom, we're on. With the cables attached now, there's another important component to this system to finish it up, which is often overlooked, is these washers that are specific to holding the cables onto the transmission. Right, so you'll have this plastic washer here. That's to allow, you know, the cables to move freely, and then this washer here is what holds it on. Now look, it's not an open washer. It's shaped to the shape of the shifter. and the shifter then will hold this in place using some cotter pins. So the plastic washer goes on first, and then the steel washer goes on top of that. And then our new cotter pin will go through that. And we are done. Now the most exciting part about putting the shifter in is being able to shift it. We're going to go ahead and try it out now, see what that feels like. Ooh. Looks like it's doing all the things. Now the one part that I've been dreading the most out of this entire swap is now the pedal assembly. I'm going to have to drop the steering column. To drop the steering column and give me plenty of room under there, I'm going to probably move the driver's seat. That's going to give me a lot of room to lay down if I need to, because there is something that I'm not really ready for, is going to be able to breach the hole that is needed for the clutch master cylinder to come in from the firewall to the clutch pedal itself. It's non-existing on this car. So I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to make a hole in this without removing the dash. Alright, the pedals are out. It wasn't easy. This bracket right here, from what I can tell, I just don't know how it comes out, so I left it there. It got hung up on the brake switch, which I decided to take out, and that let me swing it down a little bit more. Also, you'll see that we have the brake booster there. You don't see any studs there, and that's because I pushed it back. There's not a lot of room to work with under there, and so I used this pry bar to pry the booster out of the way. That gives me a few more inches to work with. Another thing that matters that's different here is our throttle cable. Take a look at the end there. That's not going to be the same on our manual pedal assembly. Side by side we have the auto, and you'll see how the cable attaches, and here's the manual. It's very possible that I could swap the pedals over, and I just might do that thinking about it, because that means I'm going to have to take another trip to the junkyard, and right now I just don't have time to do that. Next order of business is the clutch pedal itself. As I was explaining, it didn't look to be that there's any place to mount this. Sometimes there's cutouts. Let's see what this is. Oh, look at that. I wasn't expecting to see that. So there is at least something there that lets us know where we need to make our holes. And it looks like I'm going to be able to make a hole right there with the hole saw pretty easily. Let's give you some reference here. You can see from all the way back here, it's really, the access looks like it's going to be pretty easy with the regular hole saw. Also, where do we got to look to see where it's going to bolt up underneath. Let's see if we can get some light under there. And I think I saw a cutout also. Look at that. Let's peel that down. Oh. It looks like that's where the clutch pedal could mount to. There's nothing there for it to, so maybe we can drill and then add a riv nut there so we can have a bolt to attach. How many of you are Milwaukee fans? I am. A lot of my tools are. I love them. But check that yellow one out. Ugh. Who wants to see the yellow one among the red, right? That's the DeWalt. Well, I actually just came from the hardware store. This happened to be one I was missing out of this set. Anyways, I didn't have this size, and what I did was, what I'm concerned about is getting the base of this master cylinder all the way through. I'm not sure exactly what size we needed, so I went over here and tried on some others. Like, I just slid it through the master cylinder to see what would fit. It's like, oh, that one doesn't fit. Then this next one was just too big. So then I took this to the hardware store, and I found one that was the size that I needed. It says 1 inch by 5/8, and it happened to fit exactly what I needed. There it goes. All right, it doesn't look like it's going to impede anything, and it's not too large. Fortunately, the Milwaukee chucks will fit on that DeWalt. I'm not saying that all of them will, but at least you know that this particular one with that bolt pattern will fit our thread and chuck from the Milwaukee set. I was able to fit my traditional drill in there, but I also forgot that I had this right angle drill by Milwaukee. This one right here is the 12 volts. I wasn't sure how powerful it was, so I gave it a quick little shot there, and so it actually even started cutting better than the traditional versions. that just came out too nice. I'm really happy with how that turned out. So on those, I decided to use a Unibit. This is also a bit by Milwaukee. Ended up having to use this drill. We tried using the angle, but it wasn't enough angle and I just couldn't get it in there. This worked out just fine. Okay, so what's important now that I'm going to put the master cylinder up in through there because it's got to hold our pedal. And the reason I need to put the pedal in there, obviously because we're going to use it, but more importantly is I need to mark where the pedal is going to attach up there. Coming back to our master cylinder, as I'm going to set this up, from the factory there is a gasket that goes around the whole perimeter of this master cylinder and it sits flush up against where that hole would be down there from the OEM. Not bad. Tight squeeze, but it's in there. The reason that it's in now is because that's what holds the pedal to the firewall. We did run into some issues. First off, the hole that was cut there in the firewall for the master cylinder didn't expose everything that we needed open, so we just took a razor blade and cut off what we needed. But that also exposed this firewall, and you'll see this bump right there. It comes out quite a bit, I would say maybe a good inch, which then inhibits the pedal assembly from laying completely flush because the backside of this is flat and it doesn't have that curvature that you see on the firewall. But am I missing something? That really makes me want to investigate on our donor car. If I'm lucky enough and the car is still in the junkyard, I can go and all this stuff is open and exposed and I can see if I miss any brackets or something, because even with this pedal assembly sitting flush on the wall, and that's still with that inch space, this part right here seems to be at a incorrect angle, and it's still about a good inch away from actually hitting where it would need to bolt on. So I think with this, what's going to end up happening is we'll just pause for the moment, go back to the yard, hopefully that car is still apart, and just I don't have to take all this stuff out again. What a pain. It really is. Hey, we're back. It's been actually about a week and a half, something like that, since the last we worked on it. We ended up figuring out exactly what we needed and the parts that we needed to complete the 5-speed conversion. So I went out to the yard and I was actually able to inspect the car, the one that we pulled the pedal assemblies out of, the one that I was talking about that I hope that was still there. Well, fortunately it still was. And we went in there, and because the pedals and the steering column was all out, it was pretty easy to get up in there, and I was able to see what I'm missing on the firewall. So in just the clip just before, you saw like, hey, you know, the pedal isn't sitting all the way flush. Well, fortunately we're not gonna have to worry about that at all. Turns out the other body actually has these spacers that rise up off of the firewall. So the wall looks like it's going to be the same on both auto and manual. The difference is there's these spacers that sit in between the master cylinder, the firewall, and of course the pedal assembly. So no big deal. I didn't remove those because it looks like they were welded on or whatever it was. So I have some spacers that are about the same length and distance, so I'm going to use those. But there is another thing that is something that you need to take account for. Hopefully you can hear me. It's starting to get pretty warm up here in Denver. I didn't think it would get this warm. We're almost approaching the hundreds. So it feels very much like Arizona here, except with the fan on, I'm just fine. In Arizona, it just blows really cold, really warm air, opposed to this air feels relatively cool. Moving on, this thing right here. So what you'll notice is once you put the pedal assembly up against the firewall, even if you have the spacers, there's not anywhere to attach or bolt on the pedal assembly. There's just absolutely nothing there on the auto car. And when I was putting this up there, I was looking up there to see what was going on there, and it could be an issue. Was there something else that I missed off of the 5-speed? Well, yeah, it was this thing right here. And if you look closely, I end up drilling it out, and I was able to pull it off pretty easy. So I took my drill out there, and drilled it out. And a drill is something I generally keep in my toolbox when I go yarding, so it's something to think about. If you haven't seen any of our how to yard videos, check them out. That's how we were able to find a lot of the stuff that we use in our swaps and that we actually end up selling on our website. A drill came in real handy. I was just able to drill out the spot welds and bam, I pulled it off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld it up in there, and it'll probably make a little bit more sense how this works. Just like that, we're officially bolted in. Feeling pretty good. Turns out those 1/2-inch spacers worked out really well. So we're gonna start it now. Oh, that's nice. Look at that, no error codes either. Let's make sure it's out of gear. Ooh, that feels nice. Let's see if it goes into gear. Oh, it's going into gear.